I thank you all for coming out, rain or shine, to hear our speakers. I hope you have enjoyed our wonderful lineup this summer. I know I have enjoyed being with them. Thank you. The Chautauqua Women's Club is a vibrant organization with a rich history. For 135 years, we've empowered the community through education, leadership opportunities, and life-changing scholarships for students. This summer, we proudly gave $40,000 to Chautauqua Institution, bringing our total to $1.8 million in scholarships for students. But what we do best is we provide you with opportunities to meet new people, build lifelong friendships, and be a part of a welcoming community. This is why the Women's Club is known as the heartbeat of Chautauqua. If you are a member, we thank you and we encourage you to get involved. Volunteering is the easiest way to meet new friends. If you are not yet a member, please consider joining. We have membership tables over right there. You can also sign up on our website or stop by our beautiful house next to the Athenaeum Hotel. We are incredibly grateful to our 2024 program sponsors for their generous program sponsorship and their donations. They believe in our exceptional programming, and your support helps us bring relevant, thought-provoking speakers and some of the best programming on the grounds. Our 2024 program sponsors are Sherry Gillette Sigward, Lauren Rich Fine of Greece Financial, Terry Tucker and Stephen Still, McGee Women's Research Institute, and in memory of our dear Rita Arjun Auerbach, lovingly gifted by Kathy Bonner, Mary Lou Goodman, and Josette Raleigh for Rita's dedication to the Chautauqua community and her love for the Women's Club. Today, Radin will talk for approximately 45 minutes, followed by 15 minutes or so of Q&A. After his talk, please queue up to one of the two mics right here. We highly encourage you to ask questions, including the folks on the lawn, but to keep our Q&A moving, please keep your questions concise with no Chautauqua prelude. Today's lecture is being videotaped by Ed Tomasini, which includes the Q&A session. If you do not want to be videotaped, please refrain from asking a question. And when you do, please go up to about 1 inch away so we can record properly. Let's give a big thank you to Ed for his services this season. He helped us out greatly. Thank you. I hope you all had a chance to read Robin's interesting article in today's Chautauquan Daily. Let's give a huge thank you to reporter Deb Treffs for her outstanding coverage of the Women's Club speakers. Where's Deb? I always look for Deb. Before we move on to Robin, I want to acknowledge and thank Cheryl Gorelick for recommending Robin. We have so much talent and expertise right here in our Chautauqua community, and Robin, thank you for saying yes. So on to Robin. Robin Radin, an internationally recognized expert in Chinese history, will focus on the Cultural Revolution and its impact on society. As the editor of Mao's Lost Generation, Robin brings a nuanced understanding of what we can learn from the historical and cultural significance of this turbulent period in China's past. Books will be available, and Robin will sign them after the lecture. As a history faculty member at the University of Miami, Robin created and served as the director of the Japanese Studies program from '74 to '76. After changing his career path from academic history to law and graduating from Harvard Law School in '79, he practiced law in New York City for 8 years and another 8 years in Tokyo and Hong Kong, where he was head of legal affairs for the Asia-Pacific region for Morgan Stanley and then Credit Suisse First Boston. He returned to Harvard in '96 as a senior associate of the program on U.S.-Japan relations. He moved to Harvard Law School as Associate Director of the Program on International Finance Systems at Harvard Law School from '98 to 2003, where he co-founded its Japan-U.S. Financial Symposium in 1998, the premier annual bilateral forum for the past 26 years. Radin is a graduate of the University of Chicago, PhD in history from UC Berkeley, and a JD from Harvard Law School. He was a visiting foreign scholar at Kyoto University from '69 to '71 under both Fulbright Ford Foreign Area Fellowships. As a business entrepreneur, and among other projects, Radin was a founder and CEO of a biotech company called CropTech, LLC, a founder and senior executive of a mobile app technology platform company called Tora, LLC, and a founder and senior executive of a minerals distribution company called White Gold Mountain Partners, LLC, which was a unique business joint venture between a small US group and North Korea from '97 to 2002. Since his retirement from full-time professional activities, Radin has lived in Longboat Key and Sarasota, Florida, during the summers at Chautauqua with his partner, Georgia Court, for the last 7 years. So Radin, on behalf of the Chautauqua Women's Club and the entire Chautauqua community, we are honored to have you with us. Let's give a warm Chautauqua welcome to Radin.
Well, thank you so much, Kellyanne and Cheryl, for entertaining my suggestion that I would be available to talk about this book, newly published on June 1st, and the related subject matter, which is really about the Chinese Revolution and about the impact of this program that sent a generation of Chinese young people from cities around China to remote places in the countryside, and still resonates, affecting their thought and behavior. So it is a great pleasure to be able to talk about this book, because it's a tribute to a friendship. And so many aspects of this project resonate and relate to Chautauqua, which is a place where people come to form friendships that are animated by ideas and by a mission to enjoy lifelong learning. And without that dedication, we are not equipped to participate as citizens in our country or in the world, which is so challenged today by conflicts and within our own society, divisions that are challenging to comprehend and to breach. But the way to approach those differences is to open our minds and our hearts to different views and to the knowledge that makes us competent to evaluate our times and the views of others. This book was the result of a friendship and partnership with a man who I was fortunate to meet first in New York in 1986 when he visited from China. At that point in time, he was one of the top officials of the communications capability of the People's Republic of China. He was the publisher and editor-in-chief of their English language weekly news magazine that was distributed all over the world. And in fact, he had come in '86 to New York City to open a branch of the magazine so that they could collect first-hand information for the publication managed in Beijing. I met him because I had been introduced to his daughter and son in New York. Wang Yofan, the man I'm talking about, the originator of this project on Mao's hijacked generation, he had the foresight to send his two children for education in the US in the 1970s. First, his daughter, the oldest, went to Hunter College and then graduate school, and has had a successful career as a wealth manager for various firms, including Morgan Stanley. The son he sent as the first student from mainland China to Williams College, and he graduated, I think, about in 1980, 83, 84. And through his sister, I met the son, Peter, when he needed a place to live in New York, transitioning from undergraduate to graduate school at NYU in their photography program. And I volunteered to offer him space in my house. And he lived with me for 3 or 4 or 5 years. And during that time, his father came to visit in 1986 to set up this branch. And I had the privilege to meet Wang Yofan and form a friendship. So today, you've read perhaps the article in the Daily about the range of interests that have attracted my attention, and intellectual absorption and professional activity, and I'd be delighted to talk about any one of them in our question and answer period. But here, I really want to focus on, at least initially, on Wang Yofan, the originator of the project, about his life and accomplishments, because it's a narrative that parallels the arc of the history of the Chinese Revolution, which he participated in, and then of his life turning after a career of 40 years reaching the apex of official authority over, one might say, propaganda and communication of the People's Republic to the English-speaking world. But at age 68, following the Tiananmen Square massacre, he went on. He left his official role. He was forced to retire, and then spent the next 28 years as a freelance, independent journalist, editor, publisher, translator, dedicated to all the things, all the principles and values that he could not propagate as an official of the state. All the ideas of freedom of expression, democracy, that he wanted to bring and did bring to his Chinese fellow citizens, and that we need to appreciate as part of our inheritance more than ever. So let me talk about Wang Youfan's life. Wang was born July 5th, 1927. When he was 10 years old, the Japanese army besieged Wuhan, which was his home city, and he and his family were forced to become refugees. His father was a chief financial officer of a large textile mill, so they were quite prosperous. But nevertheless, they were displaced and went on the road by boat and by foot, heading for Sichuan province. Along the way, unfortunately, his father contracted cholera and died. And the family was impoverished. He remembered having to sell his mother's heirlooms in front of the Taoist temple in Chengdu in Sichuan province. 1945, after the Japanese surrendered, Youfan was accepted as a student at Nanking University in agricultural economics, and he chose that because they had sent more students abroad than any other university in China, any other program in China. He became enthralled with the study of English and became the top student in that subject at Nanking University, and was elected to be student body president. He was disgusted with the official corruption of the nationalist government and was soon recruited by the underground communist student movement. In 1948, he joined a protest in Nanjing, which called for the immediate end of the war with the communists. There was a civil war going on, and he was arrested in December 48 by the nationalists and thrown in prison. But a year later, based upon an agreement between the nationalists and communists, he was released and went underground back to Wuhan and joined the party. And after intensive training in English and journalism, he went to Beijing as one of the first recruits to the International Communications Bureau of the new People's Republic of China. And he joined in 1958 and 60 as editor of the newly formed Beijing Review. But in 57, Mao announced a program called the 100 Flowers that offered to intellectuals an opportunity to speak out. Turned out to be a trap. And those that spoke out were then targeted for persecution. and he was one of them. He was accused of being a rightist and was demoted, and his party membership was put under probation. But he went back in 58 and 60 and worked on the Beijing Review, and then in 68, another episode of persecution with the emergence of the Cultural Revolution. In 56, beginning in 56, Mao had promoted a program called the Great Leap Forward, which was an effort to use the engine of ideology to overcome the reality of facts on the ground and jump over the hurdles required for progress in economic development through ideology. Mao organized the peasants into communes, promoted attacks on land owners. Millions of landowning farmers were exterminated. And the peasantry was organized into communes, and they were promoted to concentrate all of their metal work to build foundries in the backyards of communes and peasant houses. This was a giant catastrophe. Grain was shipped to the Soviet Union. The producers of food were deprived of sustenance, and 30 million people died of famine. As a result of that, Mao was compelled by the other party leaders to take a back seat. But in 68, he returned with the Cultural Revolution that mobilized young people to attack their elders and to attack everything old as a means of regaining his power using ideology. This also involved another round of attacks on intellectuals, and Wang Yufan was one of the targets. He was accused of being a capitalist roader and a spy for Chiang Kai-shek, publicly humiliated and told by his subordinates to perform sweeping and toilet cleaning in his office. He told me about the humiliating experience of being bossed around by his subordinates for several years. And when the Cultural Revolution was over and he was restored to his position, they never said a word of apology. And during that time, he and his family were expelled from Beijing to a small village on the banks of the Yellow River to be re-educated by the peasants. They lived in a mud house and learned how to farm and raise chickens, and his son remembered how every 2 weeks during the winter they needed to pull a sled 30 miles to collect a half ton of coal to bring back in order to heat their mud hut. So it was a bitter time, but in '72, Yofan was returned to Beijing to resume his work as a deputy chief editor of the Beijing Review. 1984, he accompanied the party secretary Zhao Ziyang to the U.S. And interviewed for the Beijing Review Henry Kissinger and Brzezinski. So he was at the very apex of the PRC's communications, international communications capacity. '86, he came back to set up the New York office, and that's when I first met him. And we became instant friends. And when I went to work in Tokyo in 1987, I visited China multiple times and met him. But in '89, the Tiananmen Square incident occurred, and Yofan had promoted an editorial view in 2 issues favoring the democracy movement. And as a result, in the aftermath of the Tiananmen massacre, he was persecuted. He was forced to resign. He lost his party membership, but fortunately he retained his retirement privileges. That allowed him for the next 28 years until he passed away on March 2nd, 2018, 6 years ago. It allowed him to serve as an independent freelance journalist, dedicating his efforts to promoting freedom of expression and democracy. And until the age of 90, he carried on that enterprise in an incredibly active way, an inspiration to all of us and to me for how one can continue with a mission of lifetime learning and also influence over the world through expression and publication. 1992, he saw that Bill Clinton was a candidate for president, and there was nothing in Chinese about him. He organized a project to translate Jim Moore's Clinton biography, Clinton, Young Man in a Hurry. And the next year, he published a book by Mark Perry that was a bestseller called The Lost Days of the CIA. 2003, he took up a project with Yale University Press, translating a volume in their series on the culture of civilization of China, on Chinese calligraphy. And it became a prize-winning book recognized by the Association of American Publishers with a first prize for the best book on humanities and the best book on art and art history, with his name as chief editor and translator on the front. 2011, at age 84, he launched with a group of friends a new publishing company in Beijing, published 10 books, translated works of nonfiction from best-selling authors in the US. This was the Lost Project that he took up, and that came about through an interaction with one of the authors of the stories, Ye Feng, who lived in Chengdu, where Fan was then living. He knew about, of course, he knew about the Churching, the Sent Down Youth program, but the subject was not well covered, he thought. And indeed, he knew that Americans were not aware of this program, and even Chinese were ill-informed. And he found through the contact with Ye Feng that there were stories that the participants had published that were available. And he investigated the sources and discovered there were thousands of memoirs. There were published in small government-controlled and party-controlled organs and online that deserved the attention of a wider audience. During the span of 17 years, close to 18 million Chinese educated youth, about one half of an entire generation, of literate teenagers from China cities were sent off to remote places in the Chinese countryside, sometimes for a decade or more, to be re-educated, to learn from the peasants. These millions of kids who were subject of this massive program of social engineering are known in China as Churching, educated youth in English, but because they were literate middle school and high school graduates from Chinese cities, they are also known as sent down youth. While we likely know more about the Red Guards during the Cultural Revolution, which is better known to Westerners, this Churching experience was far more impactful for China historically. It shaped the lives and thought of an entire generation of Chinese. Indeed, the current leadership of China, including Xi Jinping, and about a half of the rest of the current members of China's Politburo, experienced being sent down youth. As a demographic phenomenon, the Churching program has been characterized as the largest compulsory population shift in human history. This was a forced migration under state direction. It was not carried out to reverse the usual tide of population shift from poor rural places to urban areas, typical of developing countries. However, this was the thesis of the first book about the Churching program that was published by Professor Thomas Bernstein of Columbia University in 1977. But his research was exclusively based on materials from the Chinese government. He had no access to do local research. There were no foreigners allowed at that time to study China on the ground. But he wrote a book, Up to the Mountains and Down to the Villages, about the transfer of youth from urban to rural China, on the thesis that China, the PRC, had created an innovative solution to a typical problem of economic development and reversed the tide of migration from the cities to the countryside. It was a false thesis, it turned out. Rather, this program was carried out mainly to fulfill an ideological obsession of Mao Zedong, the obsession to convert city kids who, in his view, were ideologically corrupted by conventional knowledge and distracted by material advantage, into passionate revolutionary successors of Mao Zedong and other founders of the Chinese Revolution. Mao was obsessed with the challenge to sustain the Chinese Revolution and constantly dealing with the contradiction between the effects of improving the standard of living and undermining the motivation for continuous revolution. This was his constant obsession. But in this case, it was at the expense of a generation of Chinese youth. By witnessing and experiencing class struggle from the perspective of the peasants, Mao believed, the sent-down youth would be equipped to carry on the permanent revolution that he believed was necessary for his revolution to be sustained and to achieve its utopian goals. The history of the Churching episode has previously been very well presented by the scholar Professor Michel Bonin, who I recruited to this book project to write the foreword. And his book, called The Lost Generation, The Rustication of China's Educated Youth, was published in 2004 in French and English, and later republished in 2013 in Chinese. But it's a book that analyzes history. This book is about the experience from those who went through direct experience, their personal reflections. So it has an intimacy and an emotional nuance that historical analysis does not convey. It gives you direct access to the experiences of a sample of these youth and how it impacted their lives and thought. Yo Fan was driven to undertake this project by the conviction that the world needed to know about what he thought was a deportation in China that, although not as deadly as the gulags of the Soviet Union or the concentration camps of Nazi Germany, but that had disrupted the lives and had a lifelong impact on a whole generation of Chinese urban youth. These kids were forced en masse to live potentially forever, far away from home and generally dejected, subsistence rural places, and suffered all sorts of hardships and injustices in the name of receiving re-education so they could carry on the continuous revolution. After Mao's death, the regime abandoned the searching policy, but many of those who managed to return home and the minority who were forced to stay in the countryside are still struggling today to survive the lost opportunity and displacement they suffered. The 42 memoirs in the book, which were carefully selected from thousands that Yofun examined, are organized into 5 different topical and chronological groupings. First one is life and work. Second, relationships with local people. Third, love, marriage, and family. And the fourth is about the Go Home campaign to the campaign to allow them to return to their homes in Chinese cities, and then finally confessions and reflections. Each of these short works was selected because it revealed a distinctive aspect of the Churching experience. Yofun and I worked to select the best and revise them through exhaustive polish editing so that each story worked as a literary short story or as a credible reportage and would deliver maximum emotional impact. Yofun's insight as a world-class translator and editor was amplified because he had experienced himself political struggle and being exiled. And this made his translation and editing all the more visceral and vital. The kickoff story of this collection is one of the most familiar in China even today. It's called The Song of the Shirqing and the Death of the Composer. It's the story of Ren Yi, a Chirqing from Nanjing, who in May 1969 was living in a rural village with other sent-down teenagers. Feeling homesick, he was inspired to capture the shared sentiments of the group. As he said, since workers and peasants all have their songs, why not write a song for Shirqing? That night, Ren wrote down the verses, composed the tune, and sang it to his friends the next evening, accompanying himself on his guitar. Actually, last night, my friend and visitor, Roger McDonald, shared with us a number of songs playing his guitar. It was shades of the Chirqing impulse. So here was the song. White clouds soaring into the blue sky, the ancient, lovely city of Nanjing nestles by the side of the beautiful Yangtze River. There I was born and brought up. Oh, the great rainbow-like bridge thrusts at the clouds. To reach the other side of the Yangtze River, Mount Zedong, magnificent and mighty, lies near my hometown like a crouching tiger. I said goodbye to Mom, bidding farewell to my hometown. The golden times of my school days are all gone, leaving only a paper album from my youth. Ah, the road that lies ahead is so rugged and so long. I leave my footprints, both deep and shallow, on remote alien lands. Rising with the sun and coming back from the moon, with the moon, I undertake the heavy job of repairing the globe. That was one of the catchphrases that the Churching was popular among them, kind of an ironic commentary on their dejected condition, but the high-flung ideological purpose that motivated the program and their condition. Fulfilling the glorious sacred duty now turns out to be my fate. By word of mouth, this song rapidly became a sensation and was picked up as a Churching anthem all over China. Later in 1969, Ren received a letter from a friend alerting him that the friend had clandestinely listened on a shortwave radio to a broadcast from Radio Moscow that featured a version of Ren's song performed by a Russian male chorus accompanied by a band. At that very time, 1969, China and Russia were skirmishing on the Siberian border with live ammunition. So the Sino-Soviet conflict was emerging as an issue. Military clashes had broken out near the Siberian border, and Mao's internal struggle against the forces of Soviet revisionism, which in some good part motivated the Churching program. This is what he feared would happen in China. That they had crossed the line into armed combat with another communist state. Ren sensed that his song may have put him at a personal risk, since he knew Mao's statement from the Little Red Book, namely, whatever the enemy opposes, we support. Whatever the enemy supports, we oppose. He also knew another Little Red Book precept: leniency is available to those who confess, severity to those who resist. So, as a well-conditioned young citizen of the PRC, he went to the Nanjing House of Detention to turn himself in. He told his story to the desk officer, who put his mind at ease. Quote, "You just wrote a song, didn't you? Don't be afraid, nothing will happen to you." So he went home, though he remained a little anxious. Meanwhile, his anthem was being sung all over China, including Shanghai, where it caught the attention of high party officials looking to curry favor with the Gang of Four who were then in power. This was 1969, the height of the Cultural Revolution. And Mao Zedong's wife, Jiang Qing, was ascendant in leading the charge. She ordered an investigation of Ren's Churching anthem and called for criticism and denunciation of this evil song. On February 19, 1970, Ren was arrested and sent to the same Nanjing House of Detention where he had been released 7 months before. He was accused of challenging Chairman Mao's brilliant instruction on sending Churching to the countryside by evoking homesickness and embellishing the revisionist educational system. Furthermore, Ren's song was viewed as an attempt by the enemy at, quote, utilizing literature and art to attack the proletariat and to poison the minds of the young generation. On May 24, 1970, Ren was tried by the Nanjing Military Control Commission, and he was given the death sentence. Fortunately for him, the extreme sentence caught the attention of the chair of the higher provincial military commission, who commuted the sentence to just 10 years imprisonment, saying, "How can we execute a young student without any criminal record just for composing a song?" After Mao's death in 1976, the Gang of Four, including Madame Mao, was arrested. Early in '79, the political tide had turned in the Maoist ideological fervor, had changed into a program of pragmatic nation building under Deng Xiaoping. After serving 9 years for writing a folk song, Ren was retried, acquitted of all charges, and released. But even without the madness of the Cultural Revolution period, teenage Churching were victimized in various ways during their stays in the countryside. Some were employed on large paramilitary farms as cheap labor, practically slave labor in some cases, and given barely enough food to survive. Others were located in small villages where they knew nothing about farming and realized that they were taking food from the mouths of subsistence peasants just to be there. Young women from the cities were particularly vulnerable. Many found themselves isolated in remote peasant villages and were often placed at great risk of sexual harassment, rape, and even forced marriage to peasants. In one story, the death of May, the only means of escape from a life with a man and culture she hated was to commit suicide. In another, Who Was to Blame, a young woman is attacked in her dorm room at knife point in the middle of the night. She fights off the assailant, and the local authorities of the village Communist Party leaders conduct an investigation. They find that the girl was wearing tight pants and was reading romantic stories. The wife of the Communist Party secretary reports that she read the girl's notebooks and found that they were filled with words of love and passion. This is an all too familiar story, not just in far-off China. In fact, after the tide turned with Deng Xiaoping's reforms and the Shiqing program was over in 1980, Deng ordered a reckoning for some of the most notorious rapists. One official who had boasted of raping over 100 Shiqing females under his bureaucratic control was tried and given a death sentence. How are we doing?
Just 1 minute more. 1 minute.
Yes. I'll leave to you the opportunity to read more stories in this book. They are easily accessible and digestible and fascinating and diverse. In 2016, I went to meet Yo Fun to discuss our project and to travel together. At age 88, he organized our itinerary. I wanted to visit the province of Guizhou because I had started a collection of Chinese tribal textiles. And Guizhou has the highest concentration of tribal peoples in China. He organized the itinerary and invited the author Ye Feng, who was the leader of a strike in late 1978, December 78, January 79, in Yunnan province on a paramilitary farm, where he and his colleagues were assembled on December 23rd, 1978, and informed that the state council had decided that they were no longer churching, sent down youth. They were going to be farm workers for the rest of their lives on this paramilitary farm. Ye Feng led a strike, a hunger and thirst strike on the farm that attracted the attention of the state council to send an emissary, and they reversed the policy and allowed about 10 million Churching at that time to return back to their home cities. 10 and a half years later, at Tiananmen, we know that the government brought out the army and shot down the protesters in Tiananmen Square. So this was a remarkable story of a successful protest. And one of the points that Ye Feng reveals in the story is that he first turned to a copy of the Constitution of the PRC and took note of a provision that provides the right of all Chinese citizens to assemble and to strike, which is topical, and even in this context where we have a demonstration policy that restricts our freedom of assembly and expression. On that note, I will conclude my remarks and entertain questions from the audience on any subject referring to the book or otherwise.
Hello?
Yes.
Is it remotely possible that the PRC has people that are trying to recruit Americans' youth by maintaining a presence at America's colleges and universities? Thank you. Again? Okay. Is it remotely possible that the PRC is trying to recruit and indoctrinate America's youth by maintaining a presence at many of America's colleges and universities?
Well, they are doing just that through a program called the Confucian Institutes, where they provide instruction on Chinese and Chinese history. But these institutes are indeed controlled by the Chinese government, so there's some concern with that program influencing people in the wrong way.
Thank you. Going back to the history, how was Mao able to continue the slaughter and repression? Why did a number of people not try to stop it, or did they? And what was the consequences?
Yeah. Well, he was a founding member of the Chinese Communist Party in July 1921, and he had the original insight formed in the late 20s that the key to revolution in China was not following the paradigm of conventional Marxist-Leninism, but to focus on the potential for rebellion in the countryside, because China was a land of peasants, not transitioning to an industrial society with a burgeoning proletariat as in Russia or the West. He observed in his home province, 1927, a peasant rebellion against landlords, and he used that insight to propagate a ideology that was effective to mobilize peasants to join the communist military initiative. And he was aggressive and contending with potentially competing groups within the party, consolidating power, and he did this through ruthless repression and promoting division, rectification campaigns in the military base in northwest China, in Yan'an, when they escaped from the onslaught of the nationalist army. So, however, after the Great Leap Forward, the party leaders sidelined him. They didn't depose him. They sidelined him for about a decade until he was able to use the Cultural Revolution propaganda to mobilize young people to come to provide the power to overcome the entrenched establishment of the party.
How did this experiment affect what I believe had been a long-standing prejudice of northern Mandarin-speaking Chinese towards the poor southern peasants? When these students went south, did they lose or have their prejudices enhanced? And how is it felt now in modern China?
Well, there were many contradictions that had to be dealt with in this program, because, of course, the educated youth had little in common with illiterate peasants, and although they were sent to learn from the peasants, they were in most cases taking food out of the mouths of the peasants because they had no knowledge of growing food on their own, or of herding sheep or whatever they were assigned to do. Plus, China had a household registration system that prevented any kind of mobility for the peasants to leave, except later, when they were needed to man factories much later on. So this was always an issue of contradiction. The students were assigned to learn from the peasants, but they had nothing in common. Stories tell about emotional connections and empathetic interactions, but it was a challenge.
Didn't Nixon and Kissinger go to China right in the middle of this? And did they know that this program was going on? If so, why did they go?
Yeah, well, yes, in 72, Kissinger led the way to that rapprochement in an effort to undermine the Soviet Union. China had its own conflicts, as I've discussed, on an ideological basis as Khrushchev moves the Soviet Union in a revisionist way. It challenged Mao's ideology, and he feared that it would infect and undermine the control of the party in China. So it was a geopolitical maneuver to interfere with the Sino-Soviet, the strength of the Sino-Soviet bloc, though there was so much misunderstanding and continues to be misunderstanding about the dynamics between Russia and China. So it was a geopolitical maneuver to benefit both parties in their struggle against their rivals. That's why they did it. But relations did not become normalized, as I pointed out, until January 1, 1979. And that was that historical context was key to the success of the riot strikes by students to reclaim their home household registration rights and return to the cities of their birth. Yes.
Yes. Did the families affected by this transition to the country have the option of migrating to Taiwan? I may be off on my geography, my history of Taiwan, but was there an option, although it might have been difficult? Taiwan was existing at this time. I don't know.
Well, there were exceptional cases of Churching migrating over the Burmese and Laotian border, and some of them might have found their way to Taiwan, but most of them stayed in that area as rebel military enclaves, actually, that still function today. So that was not an option.
No.
And the history of Taiwan and China's sovereignty over it is really not well understood today. We assume that Taiwan has always been, an integral part of China, but China did not assert sovereignty over Taiwan until 1683. Very late in the arc of imperial history. And then in 1895, as a result of a treaty with Japan, Japan's victory over China in the first Sino-Japanese War, Taiwan was ceded to Japan. And it had been occupied by the Portuguese in earlier times, and there were indigenous tribal people who were living there. So there's a lot of misunderstanding about the status of Taiwan and its relationship to mainland China.
Thank you.
Can I follow up that?
One more?
Last question.
Can I follow up that? Because I was living in Taiwan at exactly that time. In fact, we were all at a New Year's Eve party, and all of a sudden, all the American ambassador, et cetera, disappeared. Oh, great. Oh no. Oh, sorry. It was really big. It was really big. Anyway, sorry. I kind of wondered how everybody.
An infiltrator from the PRC.
Sorry. Have I forgotten my question? Sorry. Have I forgotten my question? I was just wondering, how the U.S. and China, or in Taiwan now, in fact, had thought about this happening at that time, and how that has in fact impacted all the rest of the history between the two countries. Yeah, just wondering if there's, because it's such an issue right now about how much support Taiwan will get.
Yeah. Well, Joe Biden has declared that we would defend Taiwan, but that is not fortified by any treaty. In fact, it contradicts. It contradicts the understanding with China that was reached as part of the normalization in '72, or I should say the normalization in January 1, '79, but the agreement in '72 to establish the two China policy and to acknowledge that there was one China, one sovereign China, and that Taiwan was not recognized as the representative of China in the UN and displaced in that sense. If you're asking me to predict what will happen going forward with our relations with Taiwan, I don't believe that anything will happen very soon. The Chinese are likely to wait until they feel entirely secure in their military, their ability to control that situation militarily, and they have not reached that capacity at this point. 10 years down the road, it may be quite different. But things change, and we hope that with greater understanding, the two parties who are intricately codependent economically can work out a coexistence that will prevent war that has the potential to generate a third world war. So it's critical that all of us understand that relationship better and help influence resolution on a peaceful basis and maintenance of relationships that are mutually beneficial. which is the case today.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Have a great rest of the season.